Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Biggsville in Henderson County, which since 2006 has been home to the Horse and Buggy Museum. This museum captures the era, the horse and buggy era, from 1820 to 1920, with some added new technology. Jerry Weibel, people see a sign in Biggsville and it says Horse and Buggy Museum. And they're thinking to themselves, I don't think I've ever heard of a horse and buggy museum, or why would anybody put one together? But you did. Why a horse and buggy museum?
I had collected a large assortment of equipment for two purposes.
I can see the large source of equipment.
I got in my mind when my grandkids were first born that I was going to pass on to them some of my love for horses and some of the teamster skills that were involved in using horses. And so from the very beginning, I started buying stuff with the anticipation of training them to be teamsters. Along the way, I started working at a living history farm, and I decided that Western Illinois needed a living history farm, and we organized a group of people to look into that possibility. I bought some of the larger equipment like the separator and stuff to use for demonstrations out on my farm to get people familiar with the living history farm concept. And I ended up with all of this stuff and nobody to give it to. Aww. And so I decided I wasn't going to put it on the market. Yeah. I was going to sell some land and build a building and put it in it and maybe help my community here to stay on the map.
You know, you've done a lot more than that. Not only have you built this building that we're in, right in the business district of Biggsville, but you have also really stepped up the technology here. And if you could, I want to step just past you, Jerry, if we can, and show what you have. Come on down here with me. Show what you have done. What you've done at a number of these stations, 10 or 12 stations, is put in flat screen TVs. Let's see if we can just stop this and get a menu here. And let's just take a look at, these sleds, because we were looking at a sled. And this will show us how sleds were, in the wintertime, how sleds were working on the farm. It's phenomenal. Terry, how did you come up with the idea to put these flat screens together to demonstrate how the horse and buggy era worked?
I had a lot of video material that my mentor's wife had shot for her video scrapbook. And I've always believed, I've been an educator all my life. I was 20 years an educator in the Marine Corps. I've been a 4-H leader. I've been a Boy Scout leader. A picture is worth 10,000 words. And so when I had these videos, I was always wanting to break them out to explain something to somebody. So when I had the idea of a museum, I says, we're going to have videos so I can explain this stuff so people can see it. Rather than just have a pile of junk that people can't visualize, right. We're going to have something and a screen where they can actually see it working, and then they'll really understand it.
As we go through this program, we're going to get to see how your touch screens work and how each station has a menu. And if you want to see like corn or plowing or whatever, you can touch that menu and it'll come up and it'll show how the old plow horses and how the old work horses are, how the farm operated. But what I want to do is go first to plowing, because that's really your passion, isn't it?
That is correct.
Okay, let's go see how plowing works. Let's go that way. Okay, Jerry, in here there are a number of plows. Some of them are walking plows, some of them are horse-driven plows, and right now we're looking at what you call a sulky plow. Do you know why it's called that, or what does it do that's different?
The sulky plow is a riding plow that has a seat on it and some wheels. Where a walking plow, you walk behind it, it has no seat, no wheels. A walking plow and a sulky plow can have the same moldboard and shear on it, which is actually what's turning over the soil. But this one, the man gets to ride on. Normally, we would use 3 or 4 horses to pull a one-bottom sulky plow. Whereas a walking plow, it takes a little less power, and we'll use 2 or 3 horses on a walking plow. On the gang plow, which has 2 bottoms, we'll use 5 or 6 horses. The rule of thumb was that you could plow 1 acre per day per horse. So if you had 4 horses on this sulky plow, on a good day, you would get 4 acres of ground plowed.
The advantage of being in your museum is not only do you get to see the implement, but you get to see the implement at work. And all you have to do is come over here and touch the screen, and there you go. Now that's your sulky plow, right?
With 4 horses.
With 4 horses. It's ingenious. And Jerry, not only do you have this museum and have these videos, you actually have horses and you do this kind of work yourself, don't you?
That is correct. I've been playing with hobby plowing now for 17, 18 years. That's when I bought my first draft horses in 1995.
And you have to, of course, the one thing, you've got, what do you have, Percherons?
My big heavy horses are all Percheron, that's correct.
And they need a lot of hay, don't they?
That is correct.
So you've also got implements in here that we can show the process of growing and cutting hay and separating, right? Separating, or not separating hay, but binding hay and all that stuff.
Baling hay.
Baling hay, okay, I'm a city boy.
Okay.
Boy. And so let's go to hay next, okay?
That'd be fine.
Okay. Okay, speaking of hay, Jerry, I've already shown how much I know about hay. This, I think you call a dump rake.
That's correct.
Is that right? And a guy with 1 horse.
2, actually.
2 horses? Okay, this would be a way to gather up the hay and leave it in a place to where it could be then loaded. Is that one way of saying it?
That is correct.
Okay, and we'll be able to show that. And then right next to it is a hay loader. And what does the hay loader do?
When you go down the windrow that's created by a dump rake or a side delivery rake or something, you're straddling the windrow and the wagon's ahead of the rake. These grabbers are going to pick the hay up out of the windrow, and then these walkers are going to walk the hay on up to the top, where there'll be a man with a pitchfork who will be spreading it out on the hay wagon to make a load.
Okay, so this actually carries the hay up to the wagon, and there's a fellow up there distributing it evenly so it doesn't spill off the wagon.
That's correct.
Okay, and we can see that, and if you go ahead and push this, we can see how that works first. I think you called it the dump rake?
The dump rake.
Okay, let's see if we can watch that work. Okay, here's a fellow with his horses, and now he just dumped a row, didn't he?
Yeah, yes.
He gathered it up and dumped a row. Okay, and then that's going to be there for, see if we can get it to go, for the hay loader. We'll press hay loader. Okay, I'm going to fast forward that just a little bit. Isn't that neat the way that happens? Okay, and he's going along the field faster than, of course, than he would in real life. And you can see how that's pulling it, see how it's carrying it up to the top, and there's your man up there distributing it. Boy, that was hard work, wasn't it, Jerry?
Yes.
How neat. Jerry, your horse and buggy museum concentrates on a period of time.
That's correct.
And I think you're looking for it to capture 1820 to 1920. Why those years?
The 1820 was chosen because of Henderson County. In 1820, we had a few horses in the county, but they were mainly used by trappers. We still had Indians in the county, and most of the settlers wouldn't settle in the county. It wasn't until after 1832 that the Black Hawk Indians were chased across the river, and the settlers got serious about coming into this area to farm. So that's why I chose the 1820 period. The 1920 is 100 years later, which I like nice round figures, but also about 1920 is when the row crop tractor came about in 1924. And the row crop tractor was actually the thing that put most horses out of business. The horses stayed around for chores and things until after World War II, but for most of the farm work, the tractors were coming in pretty rapidly between 1924 and World War II.
And we can see, right, if we look at this screen here, that this is a rather standard way, the sort of thing you would have had to do on the farm almost all the time, whether you're plowing or grading or building a road or whatever you might be doing. And you believe that you still have perch-around horses. You believe that keeping horses kind of keeps this whole agricultural history alive, doesn't it?
Without the horses to train youngsters on and for actually to see them, they really don't understand this horse era at all. So you really have to have live animals to really make your point.
Jerry, some people would say corn is king in Illinois, and they have been planting corn for a long, long time. This is an old corn planter, although not the oldest, is it?
No, definitely not the oldest.
How does it work?
This corn planter is a 2-row planter. There's 1 row over here and 1 row over here, and they're about 40 inches apart. And this is called a check row planter. On this spool right here is check wire that you stretch down the length of the field. And every 40 inches on that wire, there's a button. And as the planter is pulled through the field and the button goes through this tripping mechanism here, it causes corn to be planted. Now, the reason they planted corn 40 inches apart and 40 inches in the row was so they could cultivate both ways, because they didn't have chemical to control the weeds.
Okay, so they had to go through there and sort of clean it up every so often so the weeds wouldn't grow up around it. Now, of course, like you say, there's chemicals to take care of that. So they can plant them closer together now, can't they?
Well, you plant continuously in the row, drill it with maybe 8 inches or 6 inches between stalks of corn, because you don't need to cross-cultivate.
Okay, now I'm going to move this back so we can get to this touch screen. And what we've done is queue up a display of this. Now he's going through and he's marking, isn't he?
That's the check wire stake at the end of the field. There's the check wire.
They would argue with that. We've got the status roads and cross roads and so forth. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to speed him up just a little. There we go.
And you'd always hate it if you got your rows crooked and somebody else would be going by and look at yours.
There's your 40-inch rows, right?
Yeah.
Planted perfectly.
Dad's were never
Hard to see.
Dad claims you get more corn per acre that way. I remember them telling about those planters, that they would jerk it every time to try and get them straight crossways so they could cultivate both ways.
And there's it doing it manually. That's before you had the buttons, and you'd have somebody sitting in there, and he had to time it perfectly, didn't he, to drop those in there?
He looked, and every time he saw a mark on the ground, which was made by that sled, he would try to plant on the mark. That way he could cultivate crossways.
Jerry, you can't step into your museum without this big thing is overwhelming. I think it's the biggest implement in here.
It is.
And you call it a separator.
That's correct.
Okay. Is that different than a threshing machine?
No, it's just another name for a thrashing machine. The bundles are fed into the machine, and then the whole straw with the head on it, the grain is thrashed out, and then the machine separates the chaff from the grain that you're trying to save. That's how it gets the word separator.
Okay.
It's going to separate the grain that you want to save from the straw that you might use for bedding or something else, but you're not going to feed it.
Let's see how this works, because you've gone to great effort here to show this on video now. And we're looking at this is the machine that we're looking at there. So you said it goes in there, and this could be any grain. It could be oats or wheat, I guess, anything, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so you throw the entire grain in there, and it separates out. And as we see, there's a number of ways to do this.
Horsepower.
We were talking about horse and buggy. Horses were used to actually provide the power for that thing, weren't they?
In this particular video, this is 6 teams on this horsepower, and the horsepower is turning a tumbling rod that goes over to the separator, whereas some of the separators that had tractors on them, like the steam engine, are run by a belt rather than the tumbling rod. But they power, it's what provides the power for the machine.
Right, and there we can see how it's related to the machine itself. And they continue to throw it in there, and let's see if we can get fast forward. Yeah, and we can see it coming out at the end there. And if we look at this picture over here, just to the left, this drawing, this is what you had before you had the touch screens, how you illustrated it, and we can see how it's blown out into the finished product.
That's actually the straw pile, which is the byproduct or the waste, unless you want to use it for bedding. The grain in this particular case was bagged from that machine, and then they are taking the bags up to the shed up at the top of the hill.
Okay, the bags are in this wagon up here, right? Okay, all right. And then this is the waste product, the byproduct, and you'd find, on a farm, you always find a use for something, right?
Yes, it would be used for bedding usually.
Yeah, yeah. Jerry, you can't help but notice the funeral wagon that you also have in your museum. And of course, it was instrumental. Life, death, horses did almost everything, didn't they? They contributed in some way.
That's correct.
And you've got a funeral wagon here, which you have actually used, or one like it.
That's correct.
Yeah. Show us what's going on here.
Well, these horses are that we just saw right here are all decked out in the fancy. That's a fly net actually that's on them, but it's all fancy to look good for the funeral. You see, with all the stuff on it. This video also has on. This is an actual funeral, and then we have another actual funeral here where we're using 6 horses on the funeral wagon to go to the cemetery. And
that funeral wagon that you see being pulled there is very similar to the one that you have in the museum here.
Yes.
In this case, the family had some special requests, didn't they? And I think I saw them on what you called a trolley. Can you locate that for us?
This was a different funeral. We put the family in a carriage, and then the friends of the family, we let them ride in these horse-drawn trolleys to the cemetery.
Fascinating. And then they had some special requests. In fact, they wanted to walk part of the way, and you were able to do that for them, weren't you?
Yeah, that was with these 6 horses here. This family wanted to walk the last quarter mile behind the funeral wagon to the gravesite. So when we pulled off of the highway into the cemetery, we stopped. They got out of their cars and walked the last quarter mile through the cemetery to the gravesite.
We saw a little bit about plowing earlier, Jerry, and I think we were looking at a 1-row plow at that time, if I'm not mistaken.
The sulky plow, was it?
The sulky plow. The sulky plow, yeah. This is a little different, though, isn't it?
Well, this is called a gang plow because it actually has 2 bottoms. This is a moldboard with a shear on it, and this is called a bottom. And there's a second one over there, so it's turning over 2 pieces of dirt as it goes down through the field, as opposed to just one.
And then it also has these discs on there which assist in that process a little bit?
Well, the sulky plow has those too. That helps to cut the trash that's on the surface so that the dirt will turn over uniformly without all the trash hanging up on the plow.
I got you.
The sulky plow we use usually 3 or 4 horses on. The gang plow pulls harder, so we'll use 5 or 6 horses on it.
That can be a real challenge if you're the horseman, isn't it?
The teamster is
the teamster. Term. Okay, thank you. Well, you have it actually yourself. You are driving this team, and do you mind if I go ahead and play this now?
No, go ahead.
Okay. And then you've got how many horses? 6 horses?
That's correct.
My goodness, and that's you behind?
That's correct.
Okay. Now there's a certain amount of artistic involvement in there. You have to have some experience to know what you're doing. In fact, those horses, what are they doing? That's a strange move.
They're stepping sideways. You see, I stopped the plow at the end where I wanted it to enter. The horses had to swing over so that the horse on the far side is walking in the furrow, and these other 2 horses are walking on the land. And now I can start down through the field.
I see.
By having them swing like that, I was only leaving about 10 feet next to the fence that would have to be plowed afterwards. If I would have swung them in and then dropped the plow, I would have had maybe 40 feet to plow at the end of the field when I got through.
You have another team working behind you. Now, they're not going over the same ground, they're going over new ground, is that right?
That is correct. You see, here's my plow making a furrow, and this horse behind me was walking in the furrow that I was just making.
I see. Boy, I'll tell you, driving 6 horses, that's a handful, isn't it?
Well, it's not as hard to drive 6 horses when you got 3 and 3 as driving 6, 2, 2, and 2.
Is that right?
Yeah, with 3 and 3, we only use 4 lines in our hand, and with 2, 2, and 2, which is 6 also, we have 6 lines in our hands because we have a pair of lines on each team of horses.
Maybe that's where handful came from. That's a real handful. Maybe that's where that saying came from. But I mean, to watch you move those horses from behind with the reins to get them to jockey into the position you needed, that's something that you really, those horses, and you have to be working in tandem, don't they?
Yes. The horses are creatures of habit, however, and so the first hour that you're out, you've got to teach them the habit, so to speak. But once they've learned the habit, they're very willing, with very little cueing, to do it over and over and over all day. They're creatures of habit. Yeah. They like that repetition. So starting out in the day is sometimes tough, but by the end of the day, they're pretty much in self mode.
Mary Lynn, when we were in the museum a little bit earlier, we had to work our way around you because you had 2 tourists here from Ohio.
Yes, I did.
And did he grow up on a farm? Is that why he was interested?
His grandfather and his father had been farming.
Uh-huh. Yes. How did he find the Horse and Buggy Museum?
When I asked him about that, he said that they found us on the internet.
Uh-huh.
So, and then they used their GPS to find the location.
You mean they couldn't find Biggsville on the map?
No, they had trouble finding Biggsville on the map.
Well, it could be a problem. It could be a problem. Now, my map had Biggsville, but it didn't have any way to get here. So there are those little issues going on.
Yes, it is.
You are off the beaten path.
That is true, and we won't be on the new highway when it goes through either.
Yeah, you'll just have to trust word of mouth, I guess, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it enjoyable?
I enjoy it. I enjoy the people. I usually learn something if I listen to what memories they have that they share with me when they go through them.
Uh-huh. And most of the people that are interested in the Horse and Buggy Museum actually probably have an agricultural background. They want to relive some of that?
Generally speaking, yes, that would be true. If they come with a grandparent, then if I can get the grandparent to start explaining what the piece of equipment does, then little pieces of family history come out that it's rewarding to see that interchange between the younger generation and the older generation.
You can't help but notice when you come to the museum that it's dedicated to Elijah Watson. And I assume that Elijah is a he.
Elijah is a he, yes.
And he was born in 1793 and died in 1858. Who was Elijah Watson?
Elijah Watson would have been 5 generations back from me. A great-grandfather and his wife and 4 sons. They came to Illinois from upstate New York. They came all the way from Albany, New York to Oquawka, Illinois by boat.
No kidding. Who'd have thought that was possible?
Well, if you would study a map and realize that a few years before they came, the Erie Canal was finished, then they could use the rivers, the Erie Canal, the Great Lakes. They came down through the center of Ohio using Ohio Canal, the Ohio River, around the tip of Illinois due to the steamboats, and back up to Oquawka.
I see. So, and he and his family would have relied very much on horses, buggies, and horse-drawn farm implements, wouldn't they?
That is true.
Yeah, and they were farmers, I guess?
They were farmers.
Did they have land near here?
They initially started farming just north of Stronghurst in a community called Olena, and there were enough Watsons there that we have a Watson cemetery in Olena. Elisha's son, Elisha Jr., bought land actually 5 miles north of Biggsville, and it was on that land that my grandfather and my father were born.
I see.
And we've just recently given the opportunity to purchase that piece of land.
Fantastic. So that's why it's dedicated to Elijah.
That's why it's dedicated to Elisha.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Recently, the Weibels bought the adjoining property, which became available, and this will be in addition to the museum. Here will be information on the milling operation that changed Henderson County, and also a blacksmith shop. With another Illinois story in Biggsville, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.